Hello, everybody. Um, hello. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E Soup. Um, I am really excited for this stream today. We kind of left on a bit of a cliffhanger, and the last stream was a little dark, a little somber. So I'm hoping for maybe like a little bit of an uptick in the mood. But I also really want to know what that brocade pouch is that Gumong had. Because we kind of left off where Gumong had this pouch that he took out and Moshi recognized it. And I realized something. I think the pouch is on the front cover. So I'm going to show y'all. If you can see, it's what Gumong is holding. It's hard to see clearly, but I was like, wait, he's holding a pouch. That's significant. That must be the one. um, Hi, War Dove. Hi, Turnips. Also, I have a link to trigger warnings in the description, so check those out if you at all feel like you might need them, because you might. um... Yeah, I looked at the cover, Ward of, and I was like, wait a minute. Because I've only really looked at the front cover art, and I've tried to avoid any of the insert art because it could be spoilery. But for the front cover, I know there's details there that when you first look at them, like, you don't know what's significant about it. And then later you read something and you're like, oh, that's what that was. So I loved already having like a little moment like that. And I guess I'm gonna get started. We are on page 95, chapter 9, which is called Caught Red-Handed. Oh, blue turnips. You can look at the bonus colored art. It's not a spoiler this time, but everything else, yeah. Okay, that's good to know. So the bonus colored art, you just mean like in the front. And I don't know if they have it in the back too. Okay, so there's art in the front that's just Moshi and Gumong in like armor mode. Sorry, there's glare. And Gumong has some kind of instrument. I feel like they mentioned that at one point. Hi, Rena. I'm glad you could make it too. Yeah, does anyone remember they mentioned like some kind of instrument that was like a mix between a trumpet and something else? I swear I remember. Yes, the Suona. Rena, thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I am gonna start chapter 9, and it's called Caught Red-Handed, which I think is funny because I think the pouch is red. So, okay. It was an extremely well-crafted little pouch, embroidered with a landscape of mountains and rivers, as well as the sun and the moon. A rosy dawn was stitched in golden thread, the winding rivers and mountains in silver, and a red agate pendant hung from the bottom. It was clear at a glance that this item was expensive. Moshi stared at the brocade pouch for a long time, rage boiling in his heart. Slowly, he spat out a few words. Who gave that to you? Gumong seemed to have noticed the rancor in his eyes and didn't reply right away. He tucked the pouch back into his robes, against his heart. Mine, he said, without answering the question. His? That was absurd. Gumong had fallen to such depths, and his jar was completely empty. How could he afford that kind of brocade pouch? Moshi was about to laugh from anger. With what money? I exchanged it. A pause. With whom? I exchanged it, he repeated, and that was all. Moshi lost his temper. What did you exchange for it? What do you have? You... He stopped. Gumong lived in a brothel. What kind of people did he meet? What could he give in exchange for this pouch? The answer was self-evident, but Moshi was still interrogating him like a fool. Oh, we have art already. Okay. Can y'all see that? And he is holding the pouch, and his eyes, I mean, there's no color in the illustration, but his eyes, like, do look a little bit, glazed over. His heart felt as if it had been scraped with sandpaper, painful and itchy. Moshi closed his eyes, wanting to soften his voice, but his pale and elegant face couldn't hide the way he clenched his jaw. In the end, as if in defeat, he opened his eyes again, his voice dangerously hoarse. Why would you want something like that? Gumong didn't seem to know what this pouch could be used for either, but he clutched it tight, then stared at Moshi, not making a sound. Because it's pretty? Moshi asked. Because you like it? Shouldn't you do something so ridiculous for a reason? Likely because he couldn't handle Shihajun's interrogation, when Gumong finally began to speak, it was slowly. Someone gave it to me. Didn't you say you exchanged something for it? Even now, you'd still lie to me? Someone... Gumong looked as if he wanted to keep talking, but something stopped him. I wonder what stopped him. He bit his lower lip, and the end, and... Wait, what? Okay, I think a word is missing. He bit his lower lip, and in the end, he again chose silence. This silence seemed to be the straw that broke Moshi's sanity. His gaze was like a sharp knife wrenching open a seashell, suddenly severe. Continue. Moshi stared at Gumong's face. Perhaps due to his extreme anger, or perhaps because the light in the room was too dim, Moshi again failed to notice there was something different about Gumong's eyes. Why did you stop? Is there anything on earth you can't say out loud? Moshi swallowed thickly, each word grinding out between clenched teeth. Speak. It won't be anything new, no matter how absurd it is. You... Someone was good to me, Gumong cut in, unmoving. It was like a sudden blow. This time, it was Moshi's turn to be speechless. His throat felt terribly dry. Someone had been good to Gumong? Preposterous. Who would treat a traitor with kindness? Then Moshi remembered. Right. Whenever Gumong had needed him, he always used smooth talk, teasing, and flirting. Now that Gumong had fallen on hard times at Luomei Pavilion, it wasn't strange to see him employ silver-tongued lies to entice another person into helping him in his time of need. But... Moshi was so angry his vision flashed dark. For a long time, his mind was stuck on the word but, unable to continue. Very well. Very well. Moshi stopped, his eyes red with overpowering fury. Only after a long while did he continue, nearly choking on his words. Gumong, Gumong, you truly impress me. Gumong didn't make a sound as he leaned against the wall, gazing at Moshi's face. Moshi lifted his head. It was as if he was trying to will any wetness from his eyes. He stood there, looking up for a while, before he suddenly brought a hand to his face and burst out laughing. I really don't know what I was clinging to all these years. I have no idea why I came to see you tonight. The more Moshi thought about it, the more anger and sorrow filled him. By the end, his voice was shaking. He slammed his fist into the wall beside Gumong, scraping his knuckles and leaving gruesome bloodstains behind. Oh, so he's a punch the wall kind of guy. As the lamplight flickered between them, Moshi pressed Gumong against the wall, his face full of hatred, like he was ready to tear the man apart. Moshi clenched his jaw. General Gu, you truly live a blessed life. Even after rotting so far, you still have someone who treats you kindly. Gumong! Madame Chin's shout came like a clap of thunder, echoing from far away. Zhou Gongzi is here. Hurry up. Change into clean clothes and make the young master nice and comfortable. Her voice pulled Moshi back to the present. He came to his senses almost immediately. Although his chest was still heaving, the uncontrollable rage in his eyes was now restrained. Moshi lowered his head slightly, his ragged breaths rising and falling in Gumong's ear. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, that vicious beast stirring inside its cage had disappeared. Those eyes remained but slightly damp. In the darkness, they shone like morning stars. Zhou Gongzi, did he give you the pouch? Gumong didn't seem to understand Moshi's hatred. He continued to gaze at Moshi's face, as tranquil as ever, and shook his head. Zhou Gongzi, Zhou Gongzi. As Moshi repeated this name in his heart, he realized this was probably the youngest son of the Zhou clan. Moshi had heard of this young master. Among the nobles of the capital, he was regarded as the most brutish piece of trash. Great. What he lacked in competence, he made up for with an unending stream of malicious ideas. Moshi looked toward Gumong. Gumong's expression hadn't changed, but he was unconsciously rubbing a scar on his arm. After a few seconds, Moshi laughed again, as if tormenting himself. What's wrong? The person who is good to you doesn't care? Without a word, Gumong tucked the pouch away. Moshi didn't move. Is Zhou Gongzi a frequent guest too? He asked. Gumong nodded. Moshi stared at him, his handsome features seeming to contain some unfathomable emotion. A moment later, he laughed once more. Before, I thought you had changed. Now I see that you're still the same as ever. You know how to make anyone happy. The darkness in his eyes deepened as though weighed down by the past. Take care. Rising from the round table, Moshi donned his cloak and strode toward the door. You're leaving? Moshi turned halfway. I'm leaving, he said, frigid. I won't stand in the way of your livelihood. But Moshi stopped. What? I took your cowrie shell. Moshi paused. Think of it as returning your past affections. Gumong knit his brows in confusion. Past affections? Moshi felt that Gumong was acting very strangely, but he was running out of time. As soon as Zhou Gongzi got upstairs, he wouldn't be able to leave even if he wanted to. Moshi glanced at Gumong one last time and turned to push open the door. But at that moment, Gumong whispered, You're rich. You have money. I want to know who you are. Moshi's hand froze inches from the door. He stood stock still for a long interval before whipping around. What? You're rich. The second part. You have money. After that. Gumong was confused by this reaction. He sounded hesitant as he repeated himself. I want to know who you are. Ooh, ouch, and ooh, indeed. A crash sounded in Moshi's ears, like a massive stone falling from a cliff before his eyes. He stopped breathing and stared fiercely into Gumong's face, his black-brown pupils shrinking as light flared in the depths of his eyes. Gumong. His heart had frozen over, but he ground out his words menacingly. Are you fucking toying with me? Gumong was confused. Ooh, you're the client. You paid, so aren't you supposed to toy with me? Moshi's features were twisted almost beyond recognition. All the strange moments during their conversation flashed through his head like great waves battering his heart, stunning him so thoroughly that for a long time he couldn't react. But right then, the door behind them creaked open. A man's lazy voice came from behind it. Gumong, your Joga is here to patronize your business. Why haven't you scrambled over to kneel and welcome? Moshi whipped around, but it was too late. That little Joe bastard had swaggered in as he spoke. He looked around the room with bleary eyes, blinking in the low light. Poor General Mo. He was such a proper person, and now, for the second time in as many hours, he was faced with the same annoying crisis. The last round had gone all right, but this time he had nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, and was seconds away from being caught red-handed by his own junior. Moshi's head had just been upended by Gumong's. You're rich. You have money. I want to know who you are. But he couldn't think deeply on it right now, so instead he cursed inwardly and pushed Gumong against the wall. He pinned him there with his tall frame, pressing one hand against the wall to neatly obscure both their faces. Gumong's eyes widened within his arms. You... Hush. Moshi lowered his head and lifted Gumong's chin. His fingers were rough and forceful. Oh, okay. His fingers were rough and forceful as he turned Gumong's head and bent down to bring them closer. Cool, thin lips drew near soft ones, their scalding breaths overlapping. Moshi didn't want to touch this traitor again, so of course he wouldn't actually kiss Gumong's mouth. Of course. In his effort to create a convincing scene, however, he still pressed very close, so close they were almost nose to nose, their lips almost brushing. The narrow space between them became a wisp of willow catkin, its fluttering drift making Moshi's skin tingle. When Moshi had hidden from Madam Chin, he'd thought his luck couldn't get any worse. There was no way anything more vexing could occur. How naive he had been. Moshi caged Gumong inside his arms. Don't make a sound, he rasped. Gumong, trapped beneath him, didn't think much of the situation. All he thought was that Moshi was too strong. He bore down on Gumong like a mountain, and it made it hard to breathe. He didn't want to be crushed further, so he instinctively nodded. Lean closer. Gumong did as he was told. Thus, from the doorway, the two looked as if they were kissing with overwhelming passion and desire, as if in the next moment they would roll into bed, utterly inseparable. This suggestive sight would make most normal people exclaim with shock and instantly turn to leave. But perverts aren't like normal people. Zhou Gongzi was taken aback at first. He backed up a few steps and checked the plaque hanging on Gumong's door. Rubbing his eyes, he muttered, "The words are black. There shouldn't be a client in here." But after the initial shock, this Zhou Gongzi became even more invested. He walked into the room, smiling. "Ayah, this is so embarrassing. It seems like the spell on the plaque doesn't work anymore. I had no idea someone else was in the room." No response. "Hey there, you're so skilled. Our great General Gu is the thorniest problem in all of Luomei Pavilion, but you've got him all pliant in your arms, letting him kiss you however you'd like. Why don't you teach me some of that impressive technique and let me have some fun as well?" He chuckled mischievously. "The more the merrier, right? Let's share." That's the end of the chapter. Blue turnips. This is what I meant last time when I said this chapter's cliffhanger wasn't better than last chapter's. Yeah, I think you're right. It would have been a tough situation to end here as well. Okay. We're on page 105 for chapter 10, which is called Heart's Fire. Moshi badly wanted to kick Zhou Gongzi to death, but he had to remain anonymous. All he could do was pitch his voice lower and icily snap, "Get lost." "Hey, what's with that tone?" Zhou Gongzi's friendly overture had been rudely rejected. So after a momentary shock, he turned nasty. "Do you know who I am? Do I care who you are? Don't you see what I'm doing? Hurry up and get lost." Gumong seemed fascinated by Moshi acting the tyrant, and stared unblinkingly into his eyes. They were so close to each other that Gumong's direct stare made him uneasy. "Stop looking at me like that," Moshi whispered. Gumong was exceptionally obedient, so he lowered his lashes to stare instead at Moshi's pale lips. Moshi was at a loss for words. When Zhou Gongzi saw the pair still tangled together, paying him no mind at all, he raised his voice to shout angrily, "You're telling me to get lost? Why don't you check yourself first?" He ground his teeth. "Your Zhouge wants that one to keep him company, so why don't you smarten up and get out of my way? Don't you know where I'm from? The Bureau of Military Affairs. I'm friends with Shihe Jun, General Mo. You scared now? Just wait until I tell on you. He'll break your legs." Moshi blinked in silence. Zhou Gongzi was too far gone, and the longer he spoke, the worse he got. "And you, Gu asshole, you little bastard. Last time you wouldn't let me kiss you no matter what I said, but you're fine with it now that it's someone else? Everyone says your souls are damaged and your mind's broken. Pah! How could you be picky if your mind was broken?" Moshi's heart skipped a beat. Souls damaged. Mind broken? He stared at Gumong's face up close, all the strangeness from earlier coming back to mind. His ears rang. He felt like he couldn't breathe. "You're only faking it for some pity. What souls are you missing? How is your mind broken? You're just a bastard. Traitor." Gumong frowned, wanting to say something. "Don't move." Even though blood still pounded in Moshi's ears, he reacted in time to stop Gumong. He closed his eyes, willing himself to remain composed. Don't move. Their mouths were so close that Moshi's every whisper sent a gust of heat sweeping over Gumong's lips. This sensation startled him. He instinctively tried to struggle free, but Moshi's formidable strength kept him restrained with one hand. "Listen to me," he hissed. Gumong didn't want to listen, but neither could he move. And so, Moshi's warmth melded into his lungs, only to leave on the next exhale, breaths entwining in the searing heat between them. Gumong's eyes were glued to Moshi's face. Moshi swallowed, head spinning as he slowly surfaced from the revelation of Gumong's condition. He collected himself with effort and opened his eyes to look at Gumong again. Afraid he would make a fuss, he chose his words carefully. Have I hit you before? Momentarily confused, Gumong shook his head. Has he hit you before? Gumong nodded. Then listen to me and ignore him. They were too close together, the air from the depths of their lungs tangling between their bodies. Moshi deliberately avoided his clear-eyed gaze. As long as you listen, I'll make him scram. Another wordless nod. Seeing the two were still caught in their inseparable embrace, Zhou Gongzi began to feel as if he really had intruded on their intimacy. He became even cruder and more furious, aroused yet frustrated. What's wrong, Gumong? You still won't say anything? What a miracle! You ignore everyone else who comes to your room. So is this man especially handsome? Or is he especially good in bed? Or is it that he's broken our agreement and he secretly paid you, traitorous bastard that you are? Zhou Gongzi stepped closer, his ragged breaths smelling of alcohol. How come a little whore like you wants him to fuck you so bad? He mumbled. Drunk people always sounded a little incoherent, rambling this way and that. After Zhou Gongzi was done taunting Gumong, he decided to move on to provoking Moshi. Hey there, who exactly are you? Why don't you turn around and let your big brother take a look? Judging by your behavior, you must come often. Zhou Gongzi dared to tug unsteadily on Moshi's sleeve. I didn't realize how close he was to them, that he's able to tug on his sleeve. I don't like that. How many times have you had him? How does our great General Gu feel? Oh, is he hot? Is he tight? Does he make you feel good? This Zhou Gongzi had managed to utterly disgust Moshi and utterly disgust me as well. Moshi's hand whipped out to slap that Zhou asshole square across the face. It was a violent strike. Blood spurted from Zhou Gongzi's nose as he crumpled to the floor. Before Zhou Gongzi could get his bearings, Moshi kicked him to the ground, making sure he fell flat on his face at an angle that prevented him from turning. I told you to get lost. Sparks flew from Moshi's eyes, his teeth tightly gritted. Don't you fucking get it? You dare to hit me? You actually dared to hit me? How insubordinate, Zhou Gongzi wailed. Who are you? I'll report this to His Imperial Majesty. No, I'll report this to General Mo. I'll report this to my dad. There was a loud clang. Moshi had tossed something before him. One bleary glance was all it took for Zhou Gongzi to break out in a shock of cold sweat. He sobered up a great deal, convulsing with a squeak before going still. Moshi was so repulsed by Zhou Gongzi's earlier crudeness that his expression was yet twisted. Will you? He asked menacingly. No. Are you going to visit him again? No. Moshi let him go with one last kick. Get lost. Don't let me see you again. Zhou Gongzi staggered up and stumbled away, too afraid to even look back. Moshi stood there stonily for a time, letting his anger dissipate. Then he bent down and picked up the command token marked with Chonghua Bureau of Military Affairs and fastened it back into the compartment within his sleeve. He turned to glance at Gumong, who stood by the wall with his hands behind his back, obediently watching without making a sound. In the chaos, his initial bewilderment had faded. Moshi had wanted to interrogate Gumong further, but at the sight of Gumong's peaceful face, all he felt was a pain like his heart was being cut apart, a turmoil he couldn't suppress. There was no point in asking Gumong anything more, and Moshi had no idea what would happen if he stayed any longer. Into this silence, Gumong suddenly spoke. "He's scared of you." Moshi said nothing. "You're scared of him, too." Moshi seemed deeply insulted by this, turning to shoot him a fierce glare. "Why would I be scared of him?" "You were scared he would recognize you." Moshi looked at him. His mood was no longer so vicious, though his expression remained displeased. "What does that have to do with you?" "Did he?" "No." Moshi's voice was cold and stiff. It was as if the scalding breaths that had brushed against Gumong's skin earlier had never existed. "But he saw your token." "There's no name on it. Every high-ranking official at the Bureau of Military Affairs has one." Moshi glanced at him as he fastened his sleeve compartment. "You did too." I have to pause for a second because I always wondered how people keep a bunch of stuff in their sleeves, and it never occurred to me there's a sleeve compartment, so it's like a pocket that you can close. I don't know why that never occurred to me, and now I'm so glad to know how that works. Anyway, where Moshi glanced at him as he fastened his sleeve compartment. "You did too." Gumong was surprised. "Me?" His confusion upset Moshi. He didn't want to talk to Gumong anymore, and he still feared what he would do if he stayed. He pushed open the door and left without a backward glance. The freezing night wind blew at Moshi's face as he stepped into the street outside. He tried to calm himself, but to no avail. Souls damaged. Mind broken. Ahaha, mind broken? Wind whipped across his face, the corners of his eyes stinging as if flayed. He'd yearned so long for closure, only to receive such an open ending. Who had done it? Who? Had it been the Liao Kingdom? Murong Lian? Or had it been Gumong himself, unable to bear the humiliation, who'd chosen to... Moshi's imagination ran wild. In the end, it was grief, of all things, that suffused him. Mind broken. Why did that make his heart ache so much? Yes, true. Gumong had given him friendship and redemption. But Moshi had done everything he could to repay him, had nearly sacrificed his life to pull Gumong back from the brink. Did Moshi owe him anything else? Had he let him down in any other way? Whether Gumong's souls were whole or his mind hale, what did that have to do with Moshi? In the empty streets, in the dead of night, Moshi stopped walking and took a deep breath. So many years of obsession, only to receive this emptiness. His hands shook against his will. Without warning, flames blazed from his palms, coalescing into a fireball that smashed explosively into the distant river's surface. Smoke hissed upward from where it struck. Gumong had betrayed him. Only the heavens knew how dearly he wanted to hear Gumong say, "I regretted abandoning, deserting, and lying to you. I cared for you." Why couldn't he have even that small thing? Why had he received nothing but a mentally impaired madman who had completely forgotten him? Why? War Dove. A lot of the Xianxia stories I've read reference Qian Kun pockets or pouches in the sleeves, so they're bigger on the inside. But yeah, little pockets. Oh yeah, I'm familiar with the Qian Kun pouch. I thought it was normally like a separate pouch, and then maybe you store it in your sleeve. Um, which I love any sort of magical item that's bigger on the inside. I wish we could have that in real life. We are on the top of page 111. Moshi closed his eyes, agonized. After so many years, he'd thought he had freed himself of this fixation, but in truth, he had been lying to himself. Gumong was too important to him. That man had taken too many of Moshi's firsts. The first time he exorcised demons. The first time he talked for hours around a warm bonfire. The first time he fought shoulder to shoulder. And that year he turned 20. On the day he came of age, on that specific night, perhaps he had drunk too much, or perhaps it had never been the wine. That had been the first time he made Gumong his. He still remembered Gumong's expression back then. When it came to such matters, Gumong cared about his pride. Even though his eyes were teary and his lips were bitten bloody, he endured, insisting that he would never leave any flower unplucked. You're fine, we're both men here, so it's all good as long as we make each other feel good. Come here, do you want your Gumong Guga to teach you how to move? Gumong shouldn't have said such things. At the time, Moshi's sanity had already been hanging by a thread. His heart was burning up. He didn't know if the flame of affection behind his ribs would ever go out. He knew he couldn't have done something like this merely because of some wine. No. His actions were born out of searing, passionate desire and deep, undeniable love. Alas, Gumong didn't understand. He only wanted to regain his dignity, and so started babbling all sorts of lewd things. In the end, he personally destroyed what remained of Moshi's rational mind. Later that night, Gumong had reached his absolute limit. Lying on his stomach, he began shaking his head and sobbing, begging Moshi to be gentler, wailing that, honestly, even if he'd done it with many girls, he'd been lying about having done it with other men, and he'd especially never let another man do him. But no matter what he confessed or revealed, or how he beseeched, Moshi could no longer stop himself. Finally, when he had bullied Gumong to the point of tears, until Gumong was crying so hard he couldn't quite speak, his eyes red at the corners as he looked at Moshi, only then did the desire in Moshi's gaze begin to subside. He stroked Gumong's cheek and said, "I'm sorry. Does it hurt?" Gumong's lashes were still wet with tears, his face flushed in Moshi's palms, his lips quivering. Moshi had left him a pathetic sight indeed. Even more pathetically, who would have believed that a crude army thug like Gumong, in truth, hadn't even slept with a single girl before? Wait, is that what he said? That's... Okay, well, that's not what he said before, but apparently he said it now. Uh... Wait, I'm just gonna look at the comments for a second, because that just took me aback. Okay, traditional sleeves did have tiny pockets in the sleeves, though only paper or small hidden weapon sized. No whipping out entire books or swords from your sleeves. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, where the heck are we? Yeah. Who would have believed that a crude army thug like Gumong, in truth, hadn't even slept with a single girl before? Not me. Faced with Gumong's silence, Moshi bent down to kiss him again. As their wet lips touched, Gumong's tears streamed down into the hair at his temples. Moshi caressed his hair, then wordlessly embraced him once more, kissing his teary eyes and taking warmth from the man in his arms. A young man getting his first taste of carnal desire could never stop himself, no matter how virtuous he was. Moshi, I think that's you talking. I don't think that's as true as you think it is. Besides, Moshi had never really been virtuous. It was only that, before Gumong, he'd never met someone who could make him lose control. He had fallen in love with Gumong first. So he had trod carefully all this time. He had never dared to demand Gumong's first time. He had only ever, with utmost care, passed all his own firsts into Gumong's hands. He had stubbornly refused to say how important these were to him, but in his heart, he still nervously hoped Gumong would treasure these moments. Yeah. Playboy Gumong is an illusion. Exactly, Rena. But Gumong had trampled his heart underfoot. Yes, it was true that Moshi hadn't wanted to stop Chonghua from putting Gumong on trial, or even killing him. Moshi had even thought that if there ever came a day when Gumong had to die, he wanted to be Gumong's final judge and final tormentor, to take hold of him with his own hands and crush him into a bloody pulp and grind his bones into dust, all for the sake of the nation's vengeance. But if Moshi put aside that vengeance, he had to admit that he had never actually wanted to see Gumong dead. He had only wanted to obtain a word of truth from his mouth, to receive a single sentence from a sincere heart. After so long, he genuinely only wanted to ask one question. Gumong, when you left Chonghua, when you left me, did you ever regret it, even a little? Only then would these years of love and hatred, gratitude and resentment, come to a conclusion that could allow Moshi to breathe, if only barely. Then he heard those words, souls damaged, mind broken. Gumong had forgotten. He would not suffer. But Moshi was damned to an eternity without reprieve. No one knew Moshi had gone to Luomei Pavilion to see Gumong, but in the following days, the people of the Bureau of Military Affairs could distinctly sense General Mo's displeasure. Even though Moshi went around looking displeased all the time, and his expression was rarely genial when he spoke to anyone, his moodiness had become even more pronounced. He didn't grow distracted during military councils, but his phrasing grew more curt. When others chattered idly during the meeting, Moshi would at once level a dark stare at them, even if he didn't cut them off, until the offending individual swallowed their own babble. This was hardly a problem in itself, but one day, General Mo inexplicably berated the young master of the Zhou clan for an hour straight, saying he had slacked off on his martial responsibilities and was excessively depraved, even though no one knew what Zhou Gongzi had done wrong. Copy the Bureau of Military Affairs rulebook 100 times and deliver it to me tomorrow, Moshi said. If you commit another offense, you can call your dad to drag you back home. Zhou Gongzi obeyed in a fit of terror and left, quaking all over. Yue Chunqing scooched over to Zhou Gongzi with a nosy look. Hey, what did you do? I... I don't know. If you didn't do anything wrong, why would that ice cube face get so angry? Yue Chunqing glanced around, smiling deviously. Be honest, are you keeping a stash of portraits of Princess Mengzi? Zhou Gongzi's face paled, looking as if the heavens were about to strike him down. Bro, spare me. How could I dare? Yue Chunqing rubbed his chin and looked at Moshi in the distance, who was staring down at the sand table with his arms crossed. That's weird. Then why does he have such a short fuse right now? In the end, Moshi, with said short fuse, couldn't control himself. He pretended not to care for 2 days, but in the end, he asked his head housekeeper how Gumong had been these past 2 years. In this day and age, being a housekeeper was no easy task. Those in the position had to excel in both managerial duties and menial tasks, advise the lord and comfort the lady, console the concubines, and deal with the young master's disputes. Shihe Manor's housekeeper was named Li Wei. All the other housekeepers of other noble lords envied him, as they knew General Mo kept a simple staff and had neither wife nor children nor concubines. It sounded like a blissfully carefree arrangement. Only Li Wei knew how hard it was to work in General Mo's employ, because General Mo would ask questions without the slightest warning. Sometimes General Mo's questions brewed in his mind for ages until he couldn't stand them anymore. By then, General Mo would have worn his own patience thin, so he would want to know the answer straight away and would be annoyed if it were even slightly delayed. In working for this master, Housekeeper Li had to think 3 steps ahead before he did anything, then 4 steps ahead when it was done. After all these years, he had more or less honed himself into a prodigy. Whenever Moshi was quietly sulking, Housekeeper Li would examine his body language to deduce what General Mo was repressing and roughly how long it would take before he exploded, as well as strategize how he should respond once General Mo did finally combust. This time was no different. Moshi bit his lip and said lightly, Gumong. Housekeeper Li rushed to answer. Yes, my lord, Gumong is utterly ruined. Was that my question? Moshi said. Sometimes being too clever wasn't a good thing, so Housekeeper Li obediently shut his mouth. Moshi turned around, eyes indifferent as he gazed at the pot of tea on the stove. It was a long while before he said anything more. Face blank, he asked, how was he ruined? Oh, that's the end of the chapter. And chapter 11 is called Slave Caller. So that's a cool chapter title. And with that, I think that's a good stopping point for like a 10-minute break. Trying to see how long this chapter is. Yeah, I think we'll stop here for 10 minutes and then come back and find out what the heck Slave Caller is about. Blue turnips. I'm sure it doesn't mean anything bad. Oh yeah, sure. Alright, I'll be back in 10 and we will find out what the deal with that is. Hello, everyone. We are back. Yeah, back to read this perfectly happy chapter. I'm sure it will be. I'm on page 117 for chapter 11, Slave Collar. In Li Wei's opinion, working as a housekeeper for a man who never spoke his mind like General Mo was the most exhausting thing in the world. If time could flow backward, he would have chosen to work for official Liu with his 18 concubines instead. It was highly likely that the thoughts of the ruthlessly cold General Mo were more convoluted than all those 18 concubines put together. But time could not flow backward. Li Wei cleared his throat and began again with utmost caution, asking, "My lord, have you visited Gumong?" "No." "Oh." Li Wei sighed in relief. "Then it's best you don't." "Why is that?" My lord, how shall I put this? In Gumong's current condition, he probably doesn't even know who he is. Never mind who you are. According to the healer's diagnoses, in the depths of his mind, he more or less thinks of himself as a strong and mighty male wolf. Moshi's eyes widened. He thinks he's a what? A strong and mighty male wolf. Are we... Okay. Oh, wait, no, I'm losing my place. Moshi stared. This was without a doubt the wildest sentence he had heard all year. He rubbed at his temples and collected himself before carefully asking, which healer examined him and delivered their diagnosis? Are you sure there's nothing wrong with their brain? It was rare for Li Wei to see Moshi react with so much shock, and he couldn't hold back his snicker. But at the sight of Moshi's expression, he quickly and obediently schooled his expression to solemnity. My lord, none of us believed it when we heard either. That's why so many nobles went to the prison to settle their debts with Gumong when he returned. However, he couldn't even talk like a normal person. It only made everyone angrier. Li Wei paused before continuing. Then His Imperial Majesty handed him to Wang Shujun. Wang Shujun also wanted to pry something out of his mouth. He tried everything, but no matter what, Gumong couldn't answer his questions. Li Wei sighed as he shook his head. He genuinely didn't understand that he was human. Moshi had to digest this information for a long time before he looked up again, gaze pausing on the little clay teapot steeping hot tea. Steam rose into the air, those tendrils of mist floating about and entwining together. I also heard his souls were damaged. Moshi paused. What happened there? Li Wei was stunned. His lord wasn't usually the sort to ask for such news, so how had he learned about this? But he hurried to reply, "They are indeed damaged, but it's not clear what exactly happened. We only know that Gumong was already in that state before he returned." "Already in that state before he returned," Moshi repeated, frowning. Yes, Meat Bun is 2 out of 2 on Dog Boys, indeed. Oh, a blue Beast of the Altar. I didn't even think about that. That name starts to bear an increased significance. Yeah, Meat Bun does love her ironies. Or, I don't, like, you know when they write MN for, like, someone kind of saying, like, yeah? I don't know why that trips me up. I don't know how to pronounce it. When Gumong entered the capital, our healers read his pulse. They said his soul's heart vein and spiritual core all bore traces of recent damage. The people of the Liao Kingdom are definitely responsible. We don't know what secret, shady techniques they employed, but on top of making him think he was a beast, of his 3 ethereal souls and 7 corporeal ones, they somehow removed 2 of the corporeal. Moshi was still for a while before asking with feigned indifference, how would losing 2 souls affect someone? That depends on which 2 souls are missing. Shennong Terrace said that of the 2 souls Gumong had lost, the first had to do with memory, and the second was related to mind, which is to say, he runs into issues in those 2 areas, but the absence doesn't significantly affect anything else. Moshi lowered his lashes. I see, he murmured. Yes, because he lost a soul related to the mind. In the beginning, he had entirely lost the power of speech. Wang Shujun sent him to Luomei Pavilion, where the overseer trained him for a full 2 years before he could understand what people were saying or speak enough to get by, if barely. As Li Wei spoke, he let out a heartfelt sigh. Ah, they used to call him Beast of the Altar, and now he really isn't much different from a wild beast. As y'all were just saying, Blue, paying attention to how characters like Lan Wangji pronounce the helps. It's like a short sound. Okay, I don't know why whenever I see the N, it throws me off. I'm just gonna have to, like, ignore the N. This was why everyone had been astonished when Gumong was sent back 2 years ago. When the city gates had opened and the prison wagon bearing the traitor Gumong slowly entered Chonghua, civilians on both sides of the road had seen that General Gu was locked up alongside some wolves. Within the prison wagon with them was a buck, which the wolves proceeded to tear apart, spraying blood everywhere. Gumong didn't bother to dodge the spray, instead crouching placidly amid the back. The wild wolves seemed to treat him like one of their own. A female wolf even dragged one of the buck's legs over to Gumong to court his favor. Gumong had reached out and dipped his hand in a little blood. He'd licked at it indifferently, but hadn't cared for the taste, and so he had lowered his hand again. Moshi listened in silence. At this point, Li Wei scratched his head. But my lord, there's something I don't understand. There's a lot of things I don't understand. Moshi's dark brown eyes turned to look at him, impassive. Why would the Liao Kingdom go to the effort of destroying 2 of his souls if they were already going to send him back? Perhaps he knew too much, Moshi said. By extracting those 2 souls, they could tie up that loose end once and for all. Li Wei was speechless. Goodness, how cruel. Can he ever recover? Moshi shook his head as if many things were weighing on his mind and didn't respond. 2 of Gumong's souls had been removed. The only cure was to find and return them to the body. But in all the vast 9 provinces, who could say where Gumong's 2 souls had gone, or if they still existed? I heard Wang Shujun kept him alive so he could experience suffering worse than death, Li Wei said. But I also heard he's awfully calm now, and not very interesting. Wang Shujun seems to have made a miscalculation. Oh, right. Li Wei remembered something and turned to Mo Shi. My lord, have you seen Wang Shujun since your return? Mo Shi shook his head. No. Although Wang Shujun held an important position in the Bureau of Military Affairs, his role was in fact altogether idle and had no attendant obligations. He was highborn and arrogant due to his status. Of the 365 days in a year, it was considered quite impressive if he showed up for 15. Mo Shi looked up. Why are you asking about him all of a sudden? Honestly, these past few years, he's gotten worse and worse, Li Wei said. If my lord should run into him, don't bother stooping to his level. You know all too well that he's always looking for ways to make trouble for you. Mo Shi didn't find this the least bit surprising. In Chonghua, there lived 3 notable gentlemen whose characters exemplified the Buddhist values of virtue, mind, and wisdom. And there's a footnote, Junzi, a term for a person of noble character. In historical settings, it is typically reserved for men, because, of course, it is. Jiang Yeshui's serenity and indifference to public favor had earned him the title of Mind, while... Oh. So, Princess Mengzi actually got... Wait. Okay. I see why the footnote was there, because they used the word gentleman, but one of the people actually is Princess Mengzi. Breaking with tradition, I guess. While Princess Mengzi's benevolence and integrity had earned her the title of virtue. Conversely, there were 3 infamous villains who perfectly exemplified the Buddhist poisons of greed, wrath, and ignorance. The one Mo Shi had to deal with most often was greed. Greed, of course, referred to one with an avarice for all that pleased, as well as a deep dissatisfaction when that hunger wasn't sated. This was the Wang Shujun that Li Wei had mentioned. Wang Shujun's name was Murong Lian, and he was Gumong's former master. In the beginning, it was he who had chosen Gumong as one of the study attendants to accompany and look after their young master's needs at the Cultivation Academy. Wang Shujun never could have imagined that this little slave possessed such unbelievable natural talent. Within a few years, Gumong's cultivation level had greatly surpassed his master's. Jealousy made Murong Lian hateful, and he constantly picked on Gumong, beating him, cursing him, and punishing him whenever he experienced the slightest displeasure. Everyone knew he had a cruel temperament, and that his character was incredibly ill-suited to the mercy of his given name, Lian. Let us recall the simplest example. Once, when Gumong was exorcising demons, he came upon a small village. The villagers were plagued by sickness, and out of compassion, Gumong used Murong Lian's name to compel the imperial healers to prescribe them medicines. Although this was against the rules, it was an act entirely motivated by kindness. Any other master would only have scolded Gumong a bit. Murong Lian was different. After he learned that Gumong had dared use his name to buy imperial medicines, he had launched into a furious flurry of curses. First, he'd given Gumong almost 80 hard lashes, then made Gumong kneel by the academy walkway for 20 days straight. At the time, Mo Shi hadn't known Gumong very well. They hadn't interacted much, and he normally didn't use that walkway, so he'd known little about it. That is, until one rainy day when Mo Shi happened to pass by and saw a silhouette. When he walked over to take a look, as it turned out, The person he had noticed was Gumong. Gumong was completely soaked, black hair sticking to his freezing cheeks, and raindrops streaming down his jaw. He knelt obediently amid the flow of the crowd with his hands around a wooden signboard with 6 words emblazoned on it in cinnabar. Slave impersonates master. Shameless beyond description. Moshi stopped before him. Crystalline raindrops splashed off his umbrella's paper surface and gathered to flow off the ribs. Those nearby cast curious glances their way, but when they caught sight of the soaring snake insignia on the young noble's robes, they lowered their heads and kept walking, afraid to look again. It seemed that Gumong had become dazed from sitting in the rain. He didn't even realize when an umbrella appeared over his head, nor did he notice that someone had stopped in front of him. When he suddenly heard someone speak from so close, he started, his eyes flicking upwards as he woke from his daze. A confused, soaked face came into Moshi's view. There were blood stains at the corner of the kneeling youth's mouth and whip marks on his cheek. He was chilled to the point of shivering, like a dog that had been thrown out into the mud. Only those black eyes still shone, clear and unclouded. That pathetic sight, paired with a wooden signboard, was as ridiculous as it was pitiful. Moshi and Gumong might not have been close, but Moshi knew Gumong had requisitioned medicine with a fake identity because he couldn't bear to let a whole village suffer through illness. Thus, Moshi went to Muranglian's quarters at the academy and asked him for leniency. Not only did Muranglian refuse, he descended into a heated argument with Moshi. Finally, he sent for Gumong to come before him. In front of Moshi, he asked, "Gumong, do you know why the insufferably arrogant Mogongza came to me today?" Water was still streaming down Gumong's face. He numbly shook his head. Muranglian crooked a finger at Gumong, compelling him forward. He caressed Gumong's soaking cheek with hands that were terrifyingly pale. Smiling insincerely, he raised his sultry peach blossom eyes, their whites showing below the irises. "He came here for you." For a moment, Gumong was visibly stunned. He turned to glance at the dark-faced Moshi, then looked back at Muranglian. In the end, he carelessly wiped the rainwater on his face and grinned. "Gongzi, are you joking?" Muranglian was still smiling. "What do you think?" No one spoke. "Your skills grow by the day. If Mo Gongza hadn't come in the rain solely to ask for mercy on your behalf, I wouldn't even know you had started fooling around with a young master from another family." "Muranglian," Moshi bit out. "I'm only speaking up for him in the name of justice. Keep those filthy insinuations out of your mouth." Gumong blankly turned to look at Moshi. There seemed to be a hint of gratitude in those sea-bright eyes. But while Muranglian's attention was elsewhere, Gumong shook his head slightly at Moshi. Muranglian shot Moshi a glance and snorted as if in threat. Then he turned around and sweetly said to Gumong, "Kneel." Gumong did as told, gradually lowering himself all the way down and dipping his head before Muranglian. "Take off your upper robe." "Muranglian, these are my quarters, Mogongza. No matter how high your rank, you shouldn't be trying to scold me in my own rooms, no?" Muranglian glanced at Gumong once more. "Take it off." Gumong did as he was told. He took off his outer robe, exposing his strong and toned physique, lowering his lashes and saying nothing. Muronglian slowly looked him over, from the lines of taut muscles to skin that glowed like honey under the lamplight. Muronglian was very slender, and his eyes raked across Gumong's body the same way a perpetually freezing young scion would look over a fine fur pelt, as if he wished for nothing more than to tear off all of Gumong's skin and wrap it around himself to make himself stronger. Attendants hurried in and brought Muronglian hot ginger tea. He took a sip and sighed. Gumong, isn't it nice to have a spiritual core? Doesn't it feel good to have so much influence at the Cultivation Academy? Aren't you so happy you were able to befriend a dignitary like Mogongze? I can't imagine who gave you the courage to lie about being Murong Gongze for the sake of a prescription, and all to save a handful of low-born villagers. Muronglian snickered. He set down the teacup with fine-boned hands and suddenly looked up. Have you forgotten your station from birth? Gumong lowered his head even further. I would not dare. Your holy weapon, your clothes, your spiritual core, everything you have today was bestowed upon you by the Murong clan. You are nothing without Wangshu Manor. Shaoju is right to reprimand me. There is a footnote. Shaoju is the title of the young master and direct heir of a household. After a long interval, Muronglian burst out laughing. But since you're so strong, I obviously can't mistreat you, lest you grow independent and end up serving someone else. He barked out an order to his attendants. Go get the young master. He drew out each syllable in a tone of extreme ridicule, mocking Gumong's presumption in daring to pretend to be the son of the Murong clan. That present I prepared for him so long ago. The other study attendants of the Murong clan were also present. One of them, Lu Jianxing, was Gumong's best friend. When he heard that Muronglian wanted to give Gumong this particular present, his expression grew unsightly. He fixed Muronglian with a gaze that could almost have been described as a glare. Muronglian lifted a hand, commanding the attendants to open the box in front of everyone's eyes. Every attendant paled, and one of them couldn't hold back from crying out, "It's a slave collar." I thought the slave collar thing would come later, like in the present timeline. I didn't think that would be something from the past. Gumong's head snapped up at these words, eyes wide. He stared at the sandalwood tray above his head, seeming numb. The color had also drained from Moshi's face. Only the most disobedient, disagreeable slaves were fitted with the slave collar, which was intended for confinement and punishment. It could never be removed without the leave of the slave's master, much like a dog collar. Though being a slave was the greatest humiliation, being bound with the slave collar was yet another level of disgrace, lowering a man to the point where even other slaves would look down on him. Why don't you put it on yourself? Muronglian waved a hand. Do you need me to say please, young master Murong? That's the end of the chapter. I don't love this. I don't love what is happening here. Okay. We are on page 127, chapter 12, Muronglian. That name is kind of a mouthful, and the more we learn about him, the more I hate having to say it over and over again. Moshi standing to the side, was furious. Murong Lian, watch yourself. Without the emperor's permission, a slave caller cannot... Halfway through his sentence, Gumong cut him off. Such a precious gift, Gumong said loudly, talking over Moshi in a tone that brooked no argument. He reached up and accepted the tray. Thank you, Xiaoju. Amid everyone else's dismay, Gumong calmly unfastened the pitch-black collar and looked up, bright-eyed, to where Murong Lian sat on the dais. Those pretty eyes displayed no resentment. Rather, they seemed perfectly peaceful. Go on, Murong Lian said icily. Holding his gaze, Gumong brought his hands to his neck. Unblinking, he fastened the slave collar around it with a click. Hey. Gumong touched his neck with interest, as if he had discovered a new source of amusement. It's not too big or too small. It fits just right. Moshi looked at him in disbelief, while among the nearby study attendants, those who were close with Gumong were on the verge of tears. This was Gumong's way. Staggering turns of fortune seemed like nothing to him. If the sky fell, he'd probably grin and pull it up to use as a blanket. That's a line. Thank you, Meat Bun, for that line. How does it look? Lu Jianxing stared at him. Murong Lian caressed the corners of his own mouth with pale and slender fingertips. Wonderful, he said mockingly. This one thanks Xiaoju for the gift, Gumong earnestly replied. It's nothing. Murong Lian's expression was cool and detached. After a moment, he waved a hand. A ball of blue light leapt from his palm and Gumong crumpled to the floor. Lu Jianxing couldn't stop himself from crying out, Gumong! Several pitch-black cords laced with lightning shot out of the slave collar to tightly bind Gumong's arms and torso. The lightning sent him into convulsions. He spasmed on the ground, shaking uncontrollably. Murong Lian seemed to think this insufficient. He tried a different spell, and the light in his palm turned red. Brambles erupted from the collar, winding around Gumong's tanned body. As thorns stabbed into him, blood streamed out. Enough! Moshi couldn't stand it anymore, and he gritted his teeth. Murong Lian, how is this reasonable? What does the discipline of my own household slave have to do with Mo Gongzi? Murong Lian said indolently. He's just a lowly slave. It would be of no consequence even if I beat him to death. Why is Mo Gongzi so concerned? We are in the Cultivation Academy. By privately collaring an academy disciple with the slave collar, you are plainly holding the academy's rules in contempt. Cease this at once. Murong Lian turned to smile at Moshi. Wouldn't it be awfully embarrassing for me to stop because you told me to? Mo Gongzi, you're as arrogant as ever, but if you are asking me for something, I can't be callous. He paused. However, shouldn't you at least give me some incentive? As Murong Lian spoke, he cycled through a few different punishments, grinning all the while. By this point, the slave collar's torments had left Gumong in a pool of blood. Moshi grabbed the hand Murong Lian was using to form the sigils and fixed his dark eyes on him. What do you want? Nothing too important. Murong Lian looked at the hand clamped around his wrist and sneered. It's only that Mother always complains that I've been lazy in my cultivation studies, that I'm no match for others. Those sultry peach blossom eyes narrowed. Murong Lian gazed at Moshi, expression inscrutable. I'll do you this favor. So long as you lose to me at the Academy's cultivation tournament on New Year's Eve. Moshi turned to look at Gumong, only to find him looking back. Gumong shook his head slightly, biting his lip. I heard that this slave of mine has been quite the help to you on exorcism missions. Neither of them replied. So, are you willing? Yes, Moshi said after a pause. I give you my word. Muranglian laughed as he waved a hand, lifting the punishment spell on the slave collar. Gumong collapsed into the puddle of crimson on the floor. Those ever-smiling lips could no longer shape words. At this, Muranglian expressed an appropriate amount of satisfaction. That'll do. The light of the slave collar went out. War Dove, this reaction is making me worried that there's more to this collar than being a collar. I agree. Like, can it control a person's actions as well? Can it, I don't know, like, get rid of some of their corporeal souls or something? Blue turnips. I'm mostly intrigued. There are things I still haven't figured out after one read. Ooh. So this is that kind of book. We're a little mysterious now. I'm just trying to pause and read comments because this is a lot. So much for having an uplifting stream this time. Okay, we're on page 130. Just stay there until you stop bleeding. Muranglian jeered at Gumong. It'll save you from having to do extra laundry. I hope this gift is sufficient to remind you at every moment who you really are. His gaze was like wasp venom. Remember the filth that is your blood. Remember to whom you belong, to whom you owe your loyalty. Muranglian was beyond despicable and beyond insane. Moshi had been abjectly disgusted with him for ages now. What Moshi could never understand was why Gumong had been so hell-bent on staying at Muranglian's side despite the cruelty. More than 20 years had passed without the slightest hint of rebellion from him. Gumong was no masochist. He was exceptionally intelligent, fearless, and assertive, which is why Moshi found this foolish loyalty absurd. He couldn't even begin to guess what Gumong had been thinking, nor did he know what exactly had transpired between Muranglian and Gumong. It was a mystery, even to this day. And now, as Li Wei brought up their old quarrels again, Moshi couldn't help but think that his reminder was rather unnecessary. Wang Shujun had always been wholly vile. How much worse could he get? He certainly didn't expect that when he finally saw Muranglian again in person, he would be unpleasantly surprised. Great. That's awesome. Blue turnips. Yuwu doesn't feel like it was written by Moran at all. It's all rainbows and sunshine. Oh, yeah, totally. One day, once court matters had concluded, a few young masters suggested going to relax at the new Pitchpot Tavern in the eastern part of the city. And Pitchpot is a game involving tossing arrows or sticks into a wine pot. It's, the name is what it says on the tin. A new female cultivator was joining in on the fun. Shiha-jun, why don't we go together? She asked. Moshi said, my apologies. Another rejection? The cultivator pursed her lips and mumbled, I know you have Princess Mengzi, but are you so dead set on her that you won't give anyone else a chance? Before Moshi could reply, Yue Chunqing popped up from behind her. Hey, Shihajun, what do you mean by that? He patted the cultivator's shoulder. Let's have some fun together, he said helpfully. Drink some tea, play a game of pitch pot. What's wrong with that? The others started trying to persuade him as well, smiling. Exactly. Come with us. Pitch pot is loads of fun. At that moment, a man's voice came from outside. It sounded like a ghost's, hoarse and wavering, without the slightest trace of warmth. The only emotion it held was scorn. Idiots pitching at pots, the pastime of imbeciles. Imbeciles? I think it's imbeciles. Along with these words came the rustling of footsteps from the darkening hall doors. Mo Shi turned to see a man holding a gauze umbrella slowly ascend the steps. I can read. His was a chilly and aloof silhouette, like a lonely wraith wandering in the evening snow. The man retracted the umbrella to his side, shaking off the snow that had amassed on its surface. He lifted his gaze to sweep it across the people in the hall, then smeared an insincere and mocking smile over his face. Everyone's here? All the juniors of the Bureau of Military Affairs started, each of them performing obeisance. Wangshu Jun. This junior greets Wangshu Shenjun. It was Murong Lian. The consummate slacker had finally shown up. Many years had passed, but when Gumong's old master stood before Moshi once more, he looked as soft and dainty as ever. Those sultry eyes were long and narrow, curving at the ends like willow shoots. There was cruelty in his charm, and coldness in his fragility, and his cheeks were even sharper and more sunken than Moshi remembered. His arrogant manner and spiteful haughtiness had also become more pronounced. Murong Lian's gaze slithered across Moshi's face, as if he'd only just noticed him in the crowd. Licking his lips, he smiled. Oh, Shihajun's here too? How uncivilized of me. Long time no see. Yue Chunqing was a brainless loudmouth who could get along with anyone, so he waved at Murong Lian with a grin. Murong Daga, I haven't seen you in a long time either. Yue Chunqing may as well have not existed. Murong Lian spared not a glance in his direction. Yue Chunqing shut his mouth. After waiting several moments with no response from Moshi, Murong Lian flashed another chilling smile. Shihajun, you and I have been apart for a long time. Why don't you seem the least bit happy to see me? That proud and distant character of yours hasn't changed in the slightest. Moshi glanced at him indifferently. Yet Wangshu Jun has changed a great deal. I presume the affairs of the capital have been a terrible strain. They've caused Wangshu Jun to lose so much weight. Murong Lian smiled. Yes, unlike you, I'm part of His Imperial Majesty's inner circle, and thus must help him shoulder his burdens. How moving, Moshi said icily. Shihajun versus Wangshu Jun was like thunder against lightning or stone against blade, filling the atmosphere with tension. Out of all the people in that hall, the only good-natured blockhead Yue Chunqing was willing to speak. Sorry, only the good-natured blockhead Yue Chunqing. He looked at both sides and persevered. Wangshu Jun, it's so late. What made you decide to take a stroll around the palace? I was just passing by. Murong Lian finally acknowledged him after a beat. It happens that I am free, and I wanted to invite everyone to come to a gathering at Wangshu Manor. As he finished, he turned his gaze, bringing with it a slight chill, to drink, and so on. No one dared to dismiss any of Murong Lian's suggestions, least of all the many people in the crowd who wanted to curry favor with him. So that's how it is, they quickly said. Obviously, it would be impolite to refuse an invitation from Wang Shujun. Muranglian shot a glance at Mo Shi's face. Shihe-jun, are you coming? Mo Shi looked over at Yue Chunqing. Since Yue Chunqing was still young and easily influenced, he thought it would be best for him to keep his distance from Muranglian. Yue Chunqing and I are busy, he said. We won't be attending tonight. Wah, no way. It's so late. How can we be busy? Yue Chunqing's eyes flew open. As if I'd want to discuss military matters with you. I want to go drink at Wangshu Manor. He ducked behind Muranglian, looking as if he'd rather be beaten to death than read another imperial military memorial. Since Yue Chunqing had openly demonstrated where he stood, Mo Shi couldn't force him. All he could do was furrow his brow slightly. Muranglian turned, arms behind his back, and gazed at the snow fluttering down outside the hall doors. On that note, Shihe-jun, he said, you haven't seen Gumang in a long time, have you? Mo Shi said nothing. I know you hate him. Back when Gumang defected, you kept trying to protect him, claiming he would never betray Changhua. Muranglian suddenly smiled again. Later on, when you met him face to face in battle and attempted to obtain confirmation from his own mouth, he wounded you, and you nearly died. Why bother bringing up the past? Mo Shi asked frostily. A snicker, as if you wouldn't remember it so long as I didn't mention it. Shihe-jun, we may not be friends, but it just so happens that Gumang deceived, disappointed, and betrayed us both, Muranglian drawled. So even though you're unwilling to admit it, I'm afraid that the one man in the whole world who can understand my hatred and despondency is you and no other. After this, Muranglian turned his sickly pale face to the side, his eyes flashing with unreadable light. He was my slave all those years ago, and now he's in Luomei Pavilion, under my control. He tilted his head, looking bored. What about it? Why don't we go take a look? Yue Chunqing naively poked his head out from the side. Hey, Luomei Pavilion? Wang Shujun, you'd better be joking. We've got maidens in the Bureau of Military Affairs. It wouldn't be appropriate for them to go play at Luomei Pavilion. The few women cultivators who heard this waved their hands hastily. We won't be attending. We hope Wang Shujun has a good time. Yue Chunqing scratched his head. Well, even if the girls don't go, Shihe-jun hates brothels more than anything. Why would he go somewhere like that? Oh, that's true. Muranglian curled his lip. General Mo is the finest commander of Changhua, ever pristine and honorable, proper and unwavering. There's no way he could possibly deign to enter an unspeakable house of pleasure. How filthy. Mo Shi made no reply. Then what about this? Muranglian tilted his neck and stretched tight muscles before continuing. Luomei Pavilion isn't far from my manor. I'll have Gumang brought there straight away, and we'll let him liven things up for us tonight. General Mo, it'll be my way of giving you. His lips were wet, his words sinister. A warm welcome home. That's the end of the chapter. I don't like anything that's happening here right now, but I guess we must proceed. We're on page 137 on chapter 13, which is an invitation from Muranglian. Yes, a great invitation, one that we so wanted to get. Ah, only Gumang? Wang Shujun, you should probably get a few more of them, one young master piped up. The two great noble lords, Shihe and Wang Shu, Both had reason to hate Gumong. Thus, the young man didn't hesitate to scoff. Given Gumong's current condition, it'd be impressive if he didn't ruin the mood. Muranglian had ignored him at first, his eyes locked on Mo Shi. But when he heard this last, the corners of his lips curved up in a smile. As soon as they saw the sign, the juniors, striving to ingratiate themselves with him, all laughed as well. "Ha, you're right. It's true that Gumong wouldn't be enough on his own. Him, attentive? Infuriating's more like it. You've given him your patronage before? Everything else aside, he was an infamous man-whore. I was curious and wanted to have some fun, and he..." Before this young master could finish, he felt a sudden piercing chill at the back of his neck. When he looked around, he found that Moshi was staring at him, eyes like frost. That gaze was like a blade in the freezing night, so terrifying that the young master forgot what he had been about to say. He swallowed, breaking out in a cold sweat. He shivered. What had he said wrong? But before he could think more on it, Moshi turned away. That sharp profile had sunk back into cool indifference without the slightest ripple of disturbance. It was as if the antipathy in his gaze a moment ago had been no more than the young master's hallucination. "How funny you are," Muranglian cut in, the picture of imperious laziness. "Who do you think Gumong is? He was once the highest-ranked general of Changhua, my former slave, and General Mo's Shixiong." Moshi didn't respond. Even if he doesn't know how to serve anyone attentively, how could we bear to miss his presence at the banquet tonight? As Muranglian spoke, his venomous gaze landed on Moshi. Now that General Mo is returned and coming to this little gathering at my manor, how could I be remiss in my duty as the host, to share? Moshi's eyes darkened with each word Muranglian spoke. By this point, they resembled black clouds pressing in on city walls. The flames of wrath became an army thousands strong, lying dormant but murderous behind the veil of his lashes. And there is a footnote for "they resembled black clouds pressing in on city walls." From Song of the Yanmen Governor, a poem by Li He. The imagery evoked is that of black clouds stirred up by war to overwhelm the skies. He did not want to see Gumong looking so wretched in front of these people. But Muranglian insisted on aiming for Moshi's fatal weakness, stabbing each word into his heart. After this flurry of speech, Muranglian drew back the corners of his mouth into a chilling smile. "General Mo, your great nemesis, your Gu Shixiong. Aren't you curious as to how I've mastered him? Don't you want to see for yourself?" In the end, the group went. My feeling during this entire stream has been I don't like where this is going, and I continue to feel that way. Wangshu Manor was a magnificent compound situated on the east side of Changhua. The insignia of the Wangshu bloodline was a bat, and sigils in its likeness glowed year-round above the residence. Within the manor, the staff largely wore deep blue robes with gold trim. As was custom in Changhua, pure-blooded nobles wore clothing trimmed in gold, but the underlying base colors were assigned by imperial decree. For example, Shiha Manor's robes were black with gold trim, while Yue Manor's were white with gold trim. At this moment, 8,000 exquisite holy lamps illuminated the sky, exuding an aura of extravagant hedonism. Halfway through the feast, everyone had relaxed. The juniors who had earlier been tense and restrained had grown lively and were milling about, drinking and playing finger-guessing games. Murong Lian lay in repose on his daybed of xiangfei bamboo, his slender, icy pale hand wrapped around a slim silver drinking token as he poked idly at the aromatics in the incense burner. Within was a type of narcotic fragrance from the Liao kingdom. Oh, okay. Where are we going? Um, it was harmless if smelled from afar, but it filled those nearby with a surge of unbelievable ecstasy. However, the ensuing depression was thrice as strong as that joy. Isn't that literally how ecstasy, the drug, works? And they're literally using the word ecstasy. To keep experiencing the ecstasy, the incense had to be inhaled repeatedly and often, which made it an addiction difficult to quit. Or I might be thinking of something else. It's some kind of club drug that I know has a particular issue with like experiencing depression when you go off of it. The late emperor had banned the stuff during his reign. The sight of Murong Lian's rapturous expression, so hazy amid the smoke that he seemed like an illusion, filled Mo Shi with irritation. Yue Chunqing was sitting next to him. As he peered at the smoke Murong Lian was inhaling, he found himself curious. He wanted to take a closer look, but Mo Shi stopped him. Sit down. We have art. We have art of Murong Lian. Unfortunately. With his incense. Yeah. His fantasy ancient Chinese club drug. What is that? Ephemera, Mo Shi replied flatly. Yue Chunqing was shocked. Ah, as in the Liao Kingdom's ephemera? He looked over anxiously. Looks like Wang Shujun's addiction is serious. No wonder he's so tired today. If you so much as think about touching that smoke, your dad will lock you away for years. My dad? Yue Chunqing said. My dad's not that harsh. At most, he'd threaten to string me up and beat me. This stuff about locking someone away is obviously your idea, not his, General Mo. Before Mo Shi could get angry, Yue Chunqing grinned. But you don't need to worry. I'm not the least bit interested in that kind of illusory pleasure. I'm so likable. I don't need that ephemera stuff to be happy. There's nothing I can't bounce back from. Unexpectedly, these last few words fell with perfect accuracy into Murong Lian's ears. Murong Lian played with the ashes in that golden beast-shaped censer. The suggestion of a faint, icy sneer slipped through his features. His voice was as indolent as the smoke as he said, Bounce back? Pfft, ephemera is worth its weight in gold. With only the Yue clan's wealth at your disposal, you couldn't smoke it even if you wanted to. Yue Chunqing didn't want to argue with him. Yes, Wang Shujun's bloodline is high and noble, he said nonchalantly. Your wealth rivals that of the very nation. How could I compare to you? Satisfied, Murong Lian turned to Mo Shi. Shihe Jun, you're sure you won't partake? Mo Shi's expression was frigid, which made Murong Lian lean back and laugh. I nearly forgot. General Mo is in the habit of austerity. He's never cared for extravagance and waste. Ah, looks like this lord is the only individual in Changhua who can afford to enjoy this Liao Kingdom treasure. Blue turnips. Oh no, he's hot. I know. It's unfortunate. They didn't really they didn't really illustrate the like sunken cheeks part. So I guess, they dolled him up a little for the illustration. War Dove, I love this little bun. Yue Chunching, I assume you mean. And I agree. He is a sweetheart. I worry about him being here with this other guy. Yeah, Blue, they did say something about sultry eyes. Yeah. Moshi absolutely didn't want to talk to this man any more than necessary. The Muranglian he remembered had already been the epitome of scum. Who could have imagined that after all these years, he could get even worse? Muranglian was proud of his rank as a pure-blooded noble, but he refused to work hard, instead sinking deeper and deeper into the muck. Now he could be described as a mindless wastrel, drowning in drunken dreams. Li Wei was right. Muranglian had indeed rotted down to the bone. My lord. Just then, the housekeeper of Wangshu Manor stepped in to report to Muranglian. The individuals from Luomei Pavilion have been brought to you as ordered. Oh, excellent. Send them in. The feast was getting rowdy, and the guests were all a little intoxicated. After the housekeeper received his instructions, he of course complied, clapping for the servants to bring in the best women and men of Luomei Pavilion to liven things up. Moshi turned, his pitch-black eyes staring falcon-like toward the door. The beaded veil tinkled, and several rows of men and women were ushered in by the housekeeper. Each of them had their own charm. Some were gaily pretty, some were innocently pure, humble or prideful, reluctant or willing. Only Gumong wasn't there. These are the prostitutes sent from Luomei Pavilion. If you gentlemen take a fancy to any of them, feel free to take them out to play. Muranglian waved a lazy hand. They're no more than bastards, and it's on me if they die. This lord is treating you tonight. Now, shouldn't you all be singing my praises and tearfully thanking me? The crowd jumped to flatter him. Wang Shujun is such a breath of fresh air. He's the emperor's cousin, after all. Anything he wants is only a word away. How enviable. The crowd licked Muranglian's boots and began to noisily drag away the pitiful victims to accompany them in wine and amusement. All at once, the scene of the banquet blurred into debauched chaos. Pretty lady, what's your name? Come here, top up Guga's cup. Moshi's expression grew darker and darker. Though he suffered it for a long while, he finally reached his limit and could listen no longer. But as he made to get up and leave, he heard Muranglian speak, mirth in his voice. Shihajun, is there no one here who pleases you? You've had too much wine. I have not, Muranglian scoffed, and Shihajun shouldn't be in such a rush to depart. That person you want to see is here. It's just that his temperament is quite strange these days. He gets anxious when he's away from Luomei Pavilion, so he's been standing outside this whole time, refusing to come in. As he spoke, he filled his own cup, downing it in one draught. If you don't believe me, take a look for yourself. Moshi turned toward the doorway. Just as Muranglian had claimed, the disjointed swaying of the bead veil revealed a silhouette in the shadows beyond, as if a wary beast were hiding in their depths, looking cautiously outward. Do you see? Muranglian said. Why don't we bring him in to have some fun with you? When Moshi didn't answer, Muranglian smiled. He stretched, his cheeks flushed red from drink, and shouted, Hey everyone, wait a moment. What is it, Wang Shujun? Muranglian narrowed his eyes, the scorn and malice on his face instantly intensifying. You're all so poorly behaved, Muranglian said. You rushed to take these beauties into your arms, but didn't any of you notice our noble Shihajun's lap is still empty? Moshi was rendered speechless. Under normal circumstances, no one would dare make such jokes about him, but these young masters were mostly wastrels. A minor wound would make them refuse to step onto the battlefield, and a major injury would make them refuse to leave their sickbed. Few of them had ever worked directly with Moshi. Furthermore, they were drunk, so they spoke without a shred of propriety. Shihajun, the capital isn't like the army, one of them slurred with a grin, but beauties are everywhere, and those belonging to Wangshujun are the best of the best. Why would you decline his offer? Even though he's in his most vigorous years, Shihajun's always busy with military matters. You ought to relax from time to time, right? General Mo's been to countless battlefields, but he's never entered a single veiled bed canopy. Life is bitter and short, so you should enjoy the present, another snickered. Yue Chunqing was still relatively sober. When he saw Moshi's expression, a sense of dread rose within him. Come on now, he hurried to cut in. Why don't you guys shut up already? Moshi glanced at him. Against all odds, this kid was the one taking things seriously. But the next thing he heard out of Yue Chunqing's mouth was, if you keep running your mouths like this, when General Mo explodes and start killing people, I'll be the first to flee. Moshi glowered wordlessly. Everyone stared at each other in their addled, half-drunken states, wearing stupid grins. In this torturous silence, Murong Lian looked sidelong out of his peach blossom eyes, his glance intoxicated yet icy sharp. Shihajun, even with all these peerless beauties before you, you want neither the women nor the men. Ah, I think... He smiled maliciously. The one you yearn for is actually your enemy, isn't it? So saying, he shouted toward the doorway, Come, bring the traitor commander Gumong for our General Mo. That's the end of the chapter. And it's 5:02. So I guess we're at a stopping point. I shouldn't be surprised that there was another cliffhanger ending. So that means that when we pick back up, it will be next Monday, 3 to 5. We will be picking up on page 147 for chapter 14, which is called Shihajun the Liar. And next week, I'm going to have a stream on Monday, but next Wednesday, I'll be out of town. So next week, we only have one stream. So next week, if we end on a cliffhanger like this, I apologize because you'll be waiting for a while. But, well, I have a lot of feelings about what's just happened. But I guess we have to go. We'll find out next week what the heck is going on. Maybe. And thank you all so much for coming to the stream. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your comments and everything. And I hope you have an awesome day and a much better day than everyone in the book is having. Hopefully. So I will see y'all next week. Yeah. Have a good one. Bye.